The city of Cape Town is certainly not budging on its decision to impound taxis that are guilty of contravening some of their bylaws. That's as Santaco's crippling strike continues to cause havoc in the Western Cape. For the latest now, let's bring in once again my co-anchor Michelle Craig, who's live to us now in Cape Town. And there are fears, Michelle, that this strike will just deepen inequalities existing in Cape Town.
Good morning, Ayanda, and a very good morning to our viewers as well. Just coming on for 7:20 this morning. We're still live. We've changed our position in Cape Town. We're now sort of closer to the city centre this morning, where we're going to bring in our next guest immediately. Lorenzo Davids is the CEO of Justice Fund. Lorenzo, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. I want to immediately get your response to the interview we had in the 6 o'clock hour of the programme with the Community Safety MEC, Regan Allen. He says this is a case of law and order and a case of taxis not wanting to abide by those laws. What's your response to that?
Yeah, good morning, Michelle, and to the viewers. I think the problem we have here is that this is selective projection of views. This is not the whole truth. The whole truth is that this is actually a prosecution of taxis while other drivers get away scot-free. Did the city and the Western Cape government go out and equitably prosecute all drivers who had outstanding fines, or did they just target taxis? Now, given the history of the taxi industry, they knew what response they were going to get. They knew what the reaction was going to be. They knew that they're not dealing with an entity that is going to abide by that kind of tactics that the city is employing. And so what happened as a consequence? Two things. One is 200,000 people, some estimate as high as 1 million people, could not get home that night. And secondly, it's the violence we see today. What governors need to do at all costs is to do risk assessment of their implementation of the law and do it with minimal damage and harm to other people. What we now have is maximum damage to property and people.
Well, maximum damage to a particular segment of society.
Absolutely, and it's the poor that's suffering. It's the poor that's now subjected to violence that's being perpetrated largely by communities and the taxi industry and the agents and the provocateurs within that particular sphere. But this could have all been prevented had there not been selective targeting and prosecution of a particular sector of society. The poor depend on this vehicle. The poor depend on getting to work. People are losing millions of rands over the next few days. The industry is losing millions of rands over the next few days due to this, which could have been prevented.
So JP Smith has been incredibly antagonistic, hasn't he? I think we can all agree with that. There's talk of thuggery, there's talk of criminal syndicates operating in the taxi industry. Regan Allen, this morning in our interview, sort of singing from kind of the same hymn book, talking about, this is just the fact of the implementation of laws. If indeed you're saying that this is a case of selective prosecuting, Lorenzo, to what end?
I think that this is a very, very poor decision by the city. And to what end? This is an approach and an outpouring of, listen, we're getting ready for 2024. This is a message that they want to get out to voters that they are in charge. This is that the city will clamp down on lawlessness. Now, it's very interesting to know that the words they use about the sector is lawless, criminals, thuggery, violence, mafia, cartels, all those negative words. Do you think that if you speak about people like that all the time, you're going to get the cooperation around a negotiating table? You've got to change your language. You've got to have different ways of drawing them in and having them sit with you in a trusted space. This is a way to demonize the industry, continue to fragment it and break it down, not bring them into a space and transform them and work with them. And now we have even greater divides between the city and that particular industry, and it's going to get worse. And let me say, Santaco is not innocent. Santaco is not to get a clean sheet here. They are as complicit in this because they are the ones who send those taxis to the N2 to blockade it. Yep. Whilst there is a strike. So how can there be a strike and they're saying they are not working, but they go and blockade the N2 with their vehicles? So no, both parties here are two big boys swinging their guns around at the expense of poor people.
I'm glad you brought about the issue of demonizing the taxi industry. As you said, there are no parties here that are blameless, right? Yeah. The taxi industry, they work under their own constraints. Taxi drivers, those sliding door operators, they have their own constraints. They're making less than minimum wage every single day. What kind of line should Santaco be taking insofar as the stay away is concerned?
Look, I understand that the response of Santaco always, or the taxi industry at large, is to whenever government acts against them, there's a stay away, there's a strike. So if we've been doing this for the last 30 years and the government knows they've been doing it for the last 30 years, why is there not a different platform to dialogue, a different platform to have discussions? You know that that's going to be the reaction. What we are stuck with here are old models, old thinking. Nothing new has come out over the last 30 years of how to deal with what is an industry that is the backbone of transport in this country and the economy in this country. So basically you're targeting an industry that has now paralyzed the city. How is there not another way to do this? Can you tell me that somehow we are just buying into this law and order mantra that it's going to fix everything? We had that under P.V. Botha, kragdadigheid, law and order under F.W. de Klerk, law and order 1976, John Foster. We have seen this playbook. We've seen this story play out. How is it that the DA in this city and in other centers are not coming up with a different approach to dealing with places and centers of conflict? They are just doing the same old, same old, same old. There's nothing new. So they get onto television, they get onto the media, and they give the kragdadigheid speech. They give the law and order speech. They give the lawlessness speech. That is exactly what has brought us to where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, Santaco, you know, in one of the many interviews that they've done as well over the past week or so, made that exact point, that they are demonized when in fact they should be treated as an essential service.
Yeah.
Millions of people depend on taxis to get to and from work and school, and as a result, depend on taxis for their livelihoods.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my point on Thursday night. I went out not against law and order. I went out against the fact that thousands, hundreds of thousands of commuters could not get home. Pregnant women, mothers, school kids, children were lost walking on the N2. Nobody talks about that. Yesterday, people got killed. Tragically so. The whole city erupts that somebody died. Nobody shouted out on Thursday night when at 12 o'clock people were not home yet. And so that's what I call the inequitable application of justice. You're going after people simply because you have a story to tell. I'm as concerned about the 200,000 people as about the people who died yesterday. Because we have to be fair and we have to be seen to be fair. Right now, there is this angel and demon mythology playing itself out in the city. The government are the angels and the taxi industry are the demons. We are not going to win this war.
Yeah. There's a chasm in terms of how this taxi strike is affected. I mean, it's a provincial strike, but if we talk about just the city of Cape Town, driving through Nyanga yesterday, through Mitchell's Plain, and then driving to the V&A waterfront, you might ask yourself at the waterfront, what strike?
Yeah, exactly. People are unaffected by this. I wrote in my column yesterday about the Kevins and Karens and the Freddie and Faridas, who are two different groups of people. The Karens and Kevins are mailing the mayor and mailing the premier to say, well done, good job, go for them, these thugs, these lawless idiots, you have to go after them. And then there's Freddie and Farida, who can't get to work, who will have no salary this week, who have no means of getting their kids to school safely and back home again. Nobody's telling both stories. And this is typical Dickensian. It's the tale of two cities, again, playing itself out over and over and over. And I am calling on the mayor, I'm calling on Alan Winde to stand up and say, we need an equitable application of justice, not selective prosecution. They have to show us. I dare them today to tell me that when they went after taxis on Thursday, that they also went after the cars of the rich that don't pay fines and drive without number plates and were impounding those vehicles as well. And I'm challenging them. And if I'm wrong, I'll come on your show and apologize for that. But I want to see an equitable application of justice. Do not target what you call and I call essential services, because the poor today are without income. Now, who's to blame for that? Yeah, Santaco carries a huge blame for that. And I've said previously that Santaco can't just abandon their customers like that. They at least had to give notice of a strike coming. So that is reprehensible what they did, to walk away from customers that needed their services. But I understand that this chasm that you talk about, the waterfront, there's no strike, there's no danger, there's no violence, there's no nothing there. In Mitchell's Plain, Delft, Nyanga and Philippi, the chaos is happening. And it's 1985 all over. The city has now recreated 1985 all over again.
Lorenzo David Slimmy, thank you for your time this morning. The CEO of the Justice Fund. This is an issue is way more complicated, Ayanda, than just taxis are striking and that it is a major convenience for some and that it is a threat of livelihoods to others. What is the responsibility here of Taxi Association Santaco on the one hand? They are not blameless, but also of the city itself and its handling of this strike action and of exactly what we've talked about over the past couple of days, this tale of two cities.
Absolutely sobering commentary there from Lorenzo. Michelle Craig, my co-anchor, live to us there from Cape Town. For now, thanks very much indeed.